Chapter 1 Staking a Claim. I was born in a small village near the Aransas River to a family of laborers working in the brick kilns. The families, many generations back as the walls of my home and the scrawlings of previous dead relatives could trace, have always been laborers on the clay flats working the brick kilns. We have little choice. There is no elevation from the labor caste. You're born a laborer, and you live long enough to have children of your own. They too will be laborers. That's simply how it is, how it always has been, how it will always be. At least, that's what I was raised to believe. I'm not ashamed of my birth or my upbringing, or even what was to be my profession in life. My father used to tell me, and I'll never forget, labor is noble. It is hard, endless work, and it is respectable. Some days it was harder to swallow his words, to understand what he's trying to tell me. Hardest days of work may still not yield enough pay to fill your belly at the end of the night, and hunger turns your stomach bitter. That bitterness inevitably spreads. When I was young, when I was immature, I'd let that bitterness take hold, look to the people who were born better than us and what they had. During those times, my father would simply take me to the square, to the post the hyenas had dug into the center of town. I remember the smell of the dead and dying to this day. The smell so primal it sticks on the insides of your nose for the rest of your life. The luckiest souls who had stood up against their betters were simply beheaded and strung up. The most unfortunate, those who had truly earned the hyena clan's ire, were strapped to the posts alive, starving cook in the sun. My father would show me and remind me of the futility in wanting more, and I never saw him as a coward. Not then, not even now. My father was strong in will and body. He just knew the reality of our world far better than I did at the time. Honestly, had things gone differently in my life, I would have become my father. I would have something to protect. The caste system reduces us to grains of sand in the dunes, knowing no matter how much we strive to shift our place, what lies beyond is only another dune. Some who are lucky may stumble upon an oasis, but even there we are still grains of sand. We can stare in wonder and tremble at the sight of the sparkling waters, but we cannot dip our heads to drink. But in that sense, that is a sense of humility much of the rest of the world lacks, so in a way it creates stronger people at the bottom. Some cannot ever come to appreciate the life of labor for what it is. It is a hopeless life, but it is a noble one. There's no shame in it. The merchant who grew fat on the meager pay of starving families, the crime lord who builds her power upon the backs of slaves, those are shameful lives. An honest day's work may yield little reward in material comforts, but it leaves the spirit free and the mind aware of its own worth. I have never felt regret, as some of my caste might, for the life I was born into. If it was something I had done to myself, perhaps, but none of us can in any way affect the circumstance we're born into. I'm a proud man, and I know I have reason to be. I know without doubt that I have earned the right to wake and breathe every day. I am alive because I have worked for it. Hauling and baking clay into bricks is the sort of labor only reserved for the strong. Not many jackals choose the profession. What labor we pursue in our lives is one of the few choices we have, and there is other less grueling work, close to Iran's. Plenty of it. More than once, I or my family members have been mocked on the flats by the more durable, more stocky sorts of creatures who are better suited to work. Boar and big cats are the favorites of the flat owners. But my family was strong, and they taught me to be strong, to value food and the health of my body over all else, to grow as large and as powerful as I could, and prove that our kind could be just as strong as any lion or boar. Our bodies were our tools, and like any other tradesman, I worked best if I kept my mind honed. I grew tall, thick, and strong as I worked my way through childhood. I knew schooling was a distant dream, and earnestly I'd never had any desire for it. Some laborers have struggled to learn the written word, or how to manage letters like the merchants do, but I'd never seen the point in aspiring towards something so far removed from my everyday life. I never saw the value in education. I suppose most laborers don't. Knowing what I know now, I believe this is a mindset the upper castes wish to maintain. Just another time honored tradition that keeps us perpetually at their feet. I don't know what I'm talking about that now. That's what my father used to refer to as big thinking, and it wasn't for us. Regardless of what I was eventually began to believe in my later years, when I was young, I was actually very satisfied to be who I was. I accompanied my father to the flats on my 6th birthday as soon as I was old enough to haul the cooked bricks near the ovens. I watched my father carry the clay drums from the flats over his broad shoulders, and I thought he looked like how a god must be. He and my mother worked like they were one, her digging, him hauling, and then I carried the bricks. Work made me feel like a true part of the family. When I ate at night, I was proud because now I was earning it. And I think my parents were proud of me as well. They were quiet people, and I never felt unloved by them. They were simply reserved, as laborers should be. There is one caste beneath us. One. The owned. The non-persons. The indentured. As a child, I would rarely see them. They are generally kept on plantations or on estates in the city. But as I grew older, I began to venture to the nearest city with my parents whenever we needed trade. I would catch sight of one every now and then. I would always know them. Not just because of the glittering metal collars. It was something about their eyes. I'd seen bodies before. People died working at the kilns and hauling clay. We lost at least one soul a season, and oftentimes it would be on a shift. There weren't many disastrous ways to die making bricks, say being kicked by a mule, so it was usually the heat. The elderly, sickly, or sometimes just the youngest workers were always at risk. We'd find someone we'd known sunk into the clay fields or slumped over the baking bricks. The indentured servants I saw when I went to the cities had the same eyes as the dead, glassy, cold, and lifeless. I asked my mother once whether or not they were truly alive at all, and she told me that indentured life was not life. It was a nightmare whose people were having. Well, they waited to die. To a child, you have to understand that statement sounds like a riddle or poetry, neither of which I was well acquainted with. I hadn't realized she meant it literally. For the 10th time this hour, I worked the now chafed, cracking paw on my right index finger between the newly adjusted snug fit of my collar. The guard reminds me again that my discomfort was entirely my own doing, saying so with an almost maternal tone this time, as though he's honestly concerned for my well-being. It doesn't make the statement any less disgusting to me. Nothing in my contract said I had a broken ankle, I snarl, curling my lip back against my sturdy teeth. They hadn't let me have any kind of meat in weeks, let alone bones to cut my teeth on, and the water they've been bringing me has made me sick nearly every day. I've lost more weight in this stretch than I ever had before in my life. I know my strength is beginning to fade, but not so much that I couldn't take the brown striped hyena squirting if I had the chance at it, I tell myself. If he weren't armed, and I wasn't in manacles with a freshly adjusted metal collar slinging the side of my neck, where the is still hot with solder. Apparently, one of the favorite punishments for people like me to adjust our collars past the point of comfortably resting on our collarbones, to dig into our fur. Then time will create a permanent mark in my fur that will remain even when I work the collar around. Constant reminder, the blacksmith told me, for servants who need to be reminded. Doesn't matter. Fact is, I'm not going to try and take the man down, for various reasons. But the most important reason is attempting to kill a plantation guy was the reason for the aforementioned broken ankle. The bitch was good with a man catcher, unfortunately. He doesn't hesitate to bring that up. Contract requires that you work, Ahina sniffs. You can't very well do that if you're on the run. We're legally obligated by our employers to keep you sedate and dutifully paying off your debt. By any means. Any injuries you sustain during an escape attempt are your cross to bear during the workday. Ours doesn't stop just because you went and got yourself damaged. I'm snarling again, so I make sure he sees it. He looks less than impressed. This time they gave me the seniors, an older hyena who's graying along his muzzle, and heavier set than most of the younger, leaner guards I've dealt with in the past. I don't recognize him from around the plantation, so he must work specifically here in this prison. The fact that he's well fed likely means he's strong, and he hasn't made a single mistake since he came to get me out of my cell. Nothing I could take advantage of. He's kept a lazy but constant gaze on me the whole time. He keeps me in front of him when we walk, and he's got my manacles on a short lead. The woman they had on me last time was less experienced, and I got the chain around her neck for a few seconds, for some of her peers heard her screaming and got to us. Besides, the man chuckles, what do you honestly know about your contract? You can't read it, because you have to fuck Cal for your bears and means what you don't know. They have to read it to us, I mutter, because both he and I know how pointless that statement is. It's more just a mantra we tell ourselves because it's comforting. It must be delirious if I'm believing it right now. Right, the man laughs and pulls me to a stop at the end of the dusty corridor we're walking. I don't recognize the hallway. I haven't recognized this place since they put me in what felt like weeks ago. I'm realizing now as we walk that it's not as large as I assumed it was. I thought for certain I was locked away in the yard he runs his prison, sort of warehouse I'd always known about growing up but never seen. It was a notorious dumping ground for unwanted persons, where the majority of unmanageable servants ended up. I would have been content to rot away there myself what remained of my life rather than return to the fields. But now that I think about it, the small cell I'd been kept in while I'd been starved, fed moldy bread and stagnant water, and also, against my own wishes, had begun to recover my ankle wound. It was far too quiet to be in any part of that crowded hellhole. I would have had to share it with someone. I doubt they would have fed an alien man anything whatsoever, and I distinctly smell pollen drifting through the air. In fact, I can see it, filtered through the dim light that permeates the small building I'm in, dancing specks in the sunlight. It's pollen, too, nothing like the meager flowers that manage to grow on the sandy banks of the Ronzes. This is thicker, richer, potent. I wasn't in the desert anymore. It smelled like the country, somewhere with monsoon weather. Now that I was paying attention, I can even tell the air is more humid. He must see me dry a new sense through my nose because he gave me a leering smirk. You don't even know where you are, do you? He echoes my thoughts. I give him no reply, but then he doesn't need one. It's on your contract, he taunts. But again, you can't read that. Getting a feel for how worthless you are yet. I don't want to confirm his statement, and I definitely don't have the energy to fight it, especially when it feels so true, so I continue to say nothing. He seems plenty fond of talking on his own. You're in Sharik Pradesh, he says, and now I'm catching the subtleties in his accent, the deep, throaty way he pronounces the ha in Sharik. My eyes widen marginally. Near the sea? Ocean, he corrects me. The Samada is no mere sea. You're in Tavesi, boy. Came quite a long way. How? When? I stammer. I don't remember any of this. After the incident with my last escape attempt and the injury from the man catcher, I remembered little other than refusing to work, getting beaten to unconsciousness, and going to sleep slumped in a shed at the plantation I was working on, and then I'd woken up in that room. There had been feverish dreams that I thought those had been brought on by the wound and the starvation. You were sold, he states simply, then grins. One of his canines is missing. Or rather, given away. Our matron shares a relation with the Sura, the clan that owned you last. She's a pragmatic woman, he says with an air of earnest respect, or else he fakes it well. Not too proud to take unwanted refuse. If it comes free at a bargain. Here near the port, strong servants are at a premium. The merchants are well aware they can simply ship them to Xanathar for better rates and compete and undercut their worth. He has my bicep, tugging me along towards the door. It's still irritatingly vigilant about keeping me in front of him. He has experience, unlike the guards at the last plantation and the one before that. Most of the workers here had their contracts bought from the interior. There's the refuse. Like you, he says in a remarkably jovial tone. So you'll be amongst the dirt you're accustomed to. What? Why can't I remember the trip, I demand. It's the one question he hasn't answered on his own, and the question that haunts me the most. I've never before had so much time in my life simply slip away like this. I've been drunk, I've lost track of a night, I've had the days of work blend together, but nothing like this honestly frightens me. And not much does that anymore. He silently reaches for his keys, reaches past and begins turning them in the lock. Sunlight streams in from outside, and that pungent scent has grown stronger. Fairly certain he's not going to answer me at all, but then he does, and his hesitant, uncertain tone tells me something I didn't expect. It's not that he doesn't want to tell me, he honestly might not know. My guess would be they smeared divine in your wounds, he says, and there's a heavy creak of metal as the lock slides free inside the door. Metal locks. This place would be nigh and impossible to break out if I tried. It was remarkably secure for such a small building. Divine? I parrot. I know the word, but not in the context. The extract from the flowers will grow here, he states. And you'll learn all about it soon enough. Wait, you mean the drug the holy men smoke? I demand. They poison me? Market value for that poison is higher than gold by weight, he snuffs. Of course, whatever they gave you is probably old, weak product, but still. He gives a feral smile down at me as he pushes the door open, piercing light streams in. Did the trick, didn't it? I'm blinded by my first glimpse of sunlight in weeks. It bores into me, staggers me back. The dampness had sunk into my fur, and the small, dank cell seems to be lifting from me already. My skin prickles with warmth beneath, and slowly my pupils constrict, taking in the sight before me. I knew there would be flowers. I didn't think that was all there would be, but it is. It's all I can see for what seems like miles. A tapestry of red and green in patches. Poppy fields as far as I can see, save a few long buildings half obscured by a dip in the terrain in the distance. Dusty dirt roads run between the field and speckled amongst the mostly green patches. I can see the hunched figures of plantation workers doing I know not what. Poppy fields are illegal near the Haranzas. For centuries, rival clans fought and spilled blood over the scarce few patches of good land to grow the flowers on, until the increase in trade from Devesi, the large delta to the southwest, where the growing season was longer and water more plentiful, made scratching out a living from farming in the desert a pointless venture. The most prominent clans of the Haranzas made production farms like this illegal, to assure that whatever land they had available could be irrigated, was used to grow food, not drug. That doesn't mean I've never seen a field before, though. People still grew the flowers illegally, just not on this scale. This is Tavesi, I say quietly, more to myself than Hyena. My head rocks back, so he slaps me hard in the back of my skull. Were you not listening, boy? He chuckles gruffly, then shoves me hard enough that my weakened legs nearly give out. You're in Matron Surus fields now, but that's no matter to you. All you need to know, all that shook through your dense little head now was me. I don't bother to look back at him and show my teeth, much as I'm tempted. Too tired, too thirsty, too hurting to be disobedient for the sheer sake of it right now. I began walking to continue to talk at my back. I'm your entire world now, dust dog. Me and these fields. He gestures. You do as I say, you work like I tell you to work, you'll do fine here. I know I got one over on a few of your previous employers, but let's be clear right at the start. Shoves me again, but this time it isn't idle. This time it's straight and small in my back when those force my vision go white for a second or so. I know I'm going to fall, but I grip my teeth and ensure at least I don't fall face down. My knees strike the dirt hard, pain courses through my bones at the joints, and I'm nauseous for a few moments, but I'm not fully down, and that's what matters. That's not going to happen with me, he declares stone-faced. Not a soul on my watch acts out without consequences. His claws scrape in the dirt as he paces around in front of me, gray eyes staring down imperiously. I stare right back. I may be tired, but this man won't see me prostrate myself before him. He'll have to take every inch by himself, by force. I've never been through this before. I've been through this before many times now. He wants me to know he has the power here. I want him to know that he'll have to earn it. I'm a proud man, but even I'm not so arrogant as to say I haven't been beaten down before. No man is impossible to conquer when you've got weapons, money, and strength of numbers to keep him subdued. That doesn't mean I'll make it easy on him. Keep on top of me, then, I warned, forcing a rough laugh to my teeth. I'm told I'm troublesome. He grins, that one missing cane on a black hole in his smile. Oh, you're not my type, boy. I prefer my meat lean. He gestures to the road a ways down, where out of the corner of my eye I see a lion, escorting a ragged bunch of happy other workers. But Vikram there, he'll take you with any mongrel he can get bent, but doesn't mind the thicker boys. I've been through this before, too. The guards always let you know who you can fuck for extra privileges or food. My pride won't allow it, of course. Or maybe I've just never been that desperate. That's alright, I snort. I'd rather die and let hyena fuck me. Finally, I get a rash from the man that isn't Mirth. His muzzle twists down into a frown. He reaches down to grab me by my collar, yanking me to my feet. I stumble as I find my bearing again and briefly know that he had me off the ground for a moment. That's no mean feat, considering I'm at least 6 inches taller than him. Aardwolf, he snaps. Not a hyena, and if I ever hear you call me one again, I'll put solder in your eyes, you understood? Eventually, you know his intensely antagonistic reaction to the common misconception, but only nod mutely for now. Could this mean something? Couldn't he just tired of people mistaking his species? Either way, it's interesting. He shoves me again. Clear something is clearly fond of. The man's strong, there's no mistaking that. This time I manage not to fall, and we begin walking again. It looks like we're heading towards the long rows of shanty buildings in the distance. Servant lodging, I can only imagine. Servants are the only people who are willing to live in hovels like that. What's your name, boy? The man I now know as an Aardwolf asks. Why do you care, I mutter. I like to put a name to my daily frustrations. He quips back, and just like that, the jovial tone is back. Kadar, I say finally. Lochin, the man replies in return, but to you, Master Lochin, or just Master. Or we can simply never speak again, I offer. He laughs. See, you're understanding. Listen, that's all you need to do is so long as you're here. Listen and obey and pay off your contract debts. What's the boarding cost here? I ask idly, as though it matters. What do you care? Lochan chuckles. You can't manage numbers, can you? I'm silent. None of you can, he says, but Clan will handle your day-to-day expenses and deduct them from your total earned each day. Your debt is paid when we tell you it's paid. Now move your legs. He kicks at them. We need to get you cleaned off. You smell like death. The lodging for the servants is exactly what I expected it to be, and exactly what every other lodging house has been like at all my previous plantations. When I arrived, the houses are already filled with people coming in from the fields. The few straw mats in each building are at a premium, and men are already claiming their ground when you arrive. But I have to be taken to the baths first. I watch a painted dog shoving a board away from one of the last sleeping mats we pass, knowing with a yearning in the pit of my stomach that by the time we return, all that will remain are bare patches of earth to sleep on. I've been sleeping on the cold dirt floor of the small prison cell I was being kept in for weeks now. My body aches from the cold that seeps into the ground when the night falls. I'd give anything for one of those straw mats. Eyes follow me as I'm led towards the bath, sizing me up. I see quite a few men here that are larger and most definitely stronger than I am at the moment. My prime might not have worried so much, but there are at least 4 lions, a pair of warthogs that look related and have some significant bulk to them, and a cheetah who leans more towards my end of the spectrum. Tall, not as broad, but strong. At the very least, I have nothing they want. Still, this is a bad way to start up my interest to a new worker circle. Malnourished, sickly, and still nursing a slight limp. My fur stands on end, but I resist showing my fangs for now. No to antagonize until it becomes necessary. I know I'll have to work. I'll have to make a reputation of myself, and fast. Make it clear I'm not worth the trouble for most of them to mess with. Even injured and exhausted, I can manage that, I tell myself. The bath is a little more than 3 cold buckets of water poured over my body, and camel fat soap to rinse the fat out of my fur. Lochin clearly doesn't want to waste much time doing this, because he hurries me through with an air of indifference. The icy water, pulled up from their well, I'm certain, sounds what little remaining strength I had in my body straight out of me, and the cloying cold sinks into my bones. I try to shake as much as I can from my fur. The light is dying fast, and I know I'll still be wet when I try to sleep. What's more, Lochin takes my tattered clothing and returns only a long loincloth. When I examine the meager strip of clothing, he merely shrugs. If you want a doty or a sarong, you have to buy them from your own earnings. Be thankful you've given anything at all. I'm going to freeze in this tonight, I point out, my ears flattened to my skull. There's that grin again. Make a friend? He he offers. My intention, actually, is to do quite the obvious. He escorts me back to one of the sleeping lodges, thrusts me in through the door, and points me toward an older doll, the only one I've seen since I came here. A gruff, "Eat!" is the last command I get from the yard before he heads off. My fur is still sticky with water and some unwashed soap, but the promise of food is strong. I head towards the elderly stooped woman, collar like the rest of us. Normally, women don't work in plantations. Female servants are more desirable as house workers and, of course, in the sex trade. But this one is too elderly to be of much use even in a house. And probably too unwanted even amongst 40 head male workers to be at physical risk. Or she simply doesn't have a choice. I feel for her, of course. But mostly I'm disappointed when I make my way over to her because all that remains in the tray she holds in her slightly shaking paws is stone-cooked flatbread. The same bread I've been eating for weeks now. I can smell the cooked meat in the air. I know there must have been some available, but of course it's all gone now. The woman barely regards me as I take a few portions of bread, except to say, "Just two." I take three and she doesn't notice. She's probably half blind. The water in the bucket near the door, but I collect one of the clipped clay cups so Revel is at least clean, unlike the water they were bringing me in the damn cell. It's cold as the bath water and probably from the same well, but I drink all of it and go back for a second cup without thinking, while forcing the bread down my throat. It's at least not stale here, and I have to eat. It's getting a little more than a few carry stairs, because most everyone is settled in for the night by now, and no one wants to move and get up with their purchase. Tomorrow, I'm sure, will come the testing. I need to somehow rest my body tonight, so I can stand my ground then. The chill in the air is already getting to me, and there isn't a straw mat available. In fact, several of the men here are already sleeping on the ground, suggesting it's a common problem. I'm sure the house will still charge me, as I haven't given a mat, though. I finished the last piece of bread I took, swallowing dryly and taking another cup of water to wash it all down. It's not meat, but it's more food than I've had in one single helping in a long time. It feels good to be so close to having a full stomach. I sweep the room with my eyes, finally taking a good look at the men I'll be bunking with in the dimming light. Only one of the lions is in this building, but so is a tiger I didn't see before, and that painted dog. I dismiss the mere thought of targeting them outright. I can't run the risk of being seriously hurt again right now. But I also can't shoot too low, or I'll be seen as a coward. Stripes catch my eye, black and grayish white in the fading light. That could only be a hyena? Here? I size the man up, on his back's to me, and he's either asleep or not perceptive enough to notice he's being targeted. A few of the men near him notice, though, and a meerkat quickly scuffs his mat a good foot or so away from the hyena, clear on my path. Hyena's ears flick, and I know by their distinct shape that my suspicions were correct. Definitely a striped hyena. He's tall, broad-shouldered, and has a fairly strong frame on him, possibly even as tall as me. But he's thin, almost to the point of looking malnourished. And unlike me, he hasn't got much muscle to back it up. He looks almost soft. Not like a worker, more like a house servant, one of the hyenas themselves. But he's got a collar. And he's here in the workhouse, so it's not his lucky day. The corner of muzzle twitches up as I make my way across the crowded room towards him. I'm not too embarrassed to admit that the thought of being a hyena has me a little thrilled. It's rare to get contracted out, let alone sold to their own kind. The clan heads might be unreachable up on the high, but this one, he can't get away from me. And I know no one here is going to help a hyena. I pass the sheet on my way, and I'm fairly certain he shakes his head at me as if to warn me away. I ignore him, but then I hear a "don't" from behind me, and when I turn to regard him, he shakes his head again. He doesn't give me much reason to back up the warning, so I only pause a few moments. Maybe the hyena is a little tougher than he looks. Maybe he's got friends after all. I can't really be certain, but I'm fairly well committed to this now. I am not spending another night in the dirt. By the time I'm 5 feet or so away from him, his ears twist and he finally notices me, turning to regard me, so he wasn't asleep after all. I soon see what had him so occupied, though. It only fuels the fire in me more. He's a chopped shank of some kind of meat, and there's actually a decent amount of flesh left on it. I drop to a crouch beside him and thrust my paw at my voice coming out in a hoarse snarl. Give it over, I demand, and hope the sick, still stuck in my throat, gives off sounding menace, not weak. What? He blinks up at me, dark black eyes drop into my paw in apparent confusion. The meat, I snap, and then for emphasis, because he mostly looks confused right now and I want myself clear. Now! This is the part where you find out what kind of fight you really picked. It's a risk you run any time you try to take on a complete stranger in a strange work group. But I had to take the first step here and now tonight. Now it's really only a question of how much he's willing to get hurt and how much he can hurt me in return. The rest of the house is silent. Doesn't seem like anyone's going to try and help him after all. Hyenas can be brutal, even the lean ones. There's a reason they're at the top of the caste hierarchy more often than not. Even lion prides lose ground to them most clan wars. They're tough, resilient, enduring, and vicious. I readied myself for a fight. It was enough when it was just a straw mat, but he has meat. And he's holding it out to me. I blinked down at the man. I thought, of course, there was a chance he would just give in, albeit a very small one, but I expected at least in that case that he'd have the decency to look crestfallen, belligerent, something. Instead, he simply looks resigned. Not even resigned and visibly upset. There's no fight in his eyes at all. I snapped the shank I made away from his hand and waited a few seconds, curious how far I can push this. Even more curious why I was warned away by one of the other workers. Clearly they know something I don't. I'm waiting to find out what that is. But all he does is stare up at me. Now that his face is closer to mine, I can get a better look at him. He definitely lacks the muscle tone to be plantation work, or at least not employed for long. But he's also not marred. There are faint black lines beneath the fur along his muzzle, and I recognize his old scars. Not from insects like in the battered lion's muzzle, the big male already asleep in the corner. Not from kiln embers like the occasional dark marks on mine. Just scratches and the occasional chip in his large ears. He's also got a few large holes in his ear that have to be piercings at one time or another, and one remaining in his nose. It doesn't look valuable, or it would have been stolen long ago, I'm certain. His fur is better kept than most of the men here, and he certainly smells a lot better than most of the men. What I'm saying, which is saying something, because I've always personally loathed the scent of his kind. I shove him by the shoulder and find I don't have much force into it to get him to give. But he doesn't seem to know what I want, so I clarify, "You're mad too," I grunt, moving on to it with my knees and stabbing a finger past him. "Get off!" That finally seems to get a reaction out of him. His ears flatten and he stiffens up a little. Clutching the sarong, he's bunched at his waist. "But I sleep here." "Not tonight, you don't," I snuff, shoving him again. I put more force into it this time, and he catches himself in outstretched paws as he falls backwards. From there on out, it's fairly easy to shove the rest of him off the mat with a kick or two, and soon he's skittering away. I'm honestly disappointed. Almost. But I'm tired. I'm worn out, and even if the hyena wasn't much of a challenge, he was apparently enough a risk around here to the other men that they weren't willing to push him around. So if that got me some ground, so be it. All I care about right now is that it got me a place to sleep. Chewing the bone for a while after easily picking off what remains of the meat. It's so damn satisfying to feel the scrape of bone against my teeth. Again, I almost don't notice any marking making his way back to my side, tentatively. My eyes flicked him and I tossed the bone his way, letting him know I still had my wits about me. It plunks into his shoulder and clatters to the hard dirt floor, but all he does is flinch. "You don't offend easily," I mutter. "I'm sorry," he says in a quiet, subdued tone. I arch an eyebrow at him, pushing myself with my elbows. I search his features for anything mocking, but the apology seems to have been earnest. I cast one more perplexed expression his way, and he averts his eyes to the ground, unable to hold my gaze. I sigh, leaning back and down my back and threading my fingers together above my head. Behind my head, the room is beginning to grow dark, and there isn't much sound other than the occasional low murmuring in some other corner of the room, and the thrum of the night insects beginning their chorus. It sounds so much different than Nerance's, and yet somehow everything still feels the same. No matter where I go in the world, the work is the same. This life is the same. I try not to think about it for now. I need to sleep. Shifting to left of me catches my attention. I realize with a start he's warmed his way near a corner of my mat. He's resting his head on the edge of the straw. staring at me in the darkness. It's unnerving. Many people avoid this man simply because he's strange. Plant a foot in the top of his skull and shove, and he gets the point, backing away from the mat at least a few inches. Still, he seemed intent on sleeping close. I don't really care, so I let him.